Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Eerie Hour. Tonight, I'm taking you deep into 9 truly disturbing stories from the most isolated corners of Arizona, where quiet towns hide secrets that should have stayed buried. In this episode, we'll travel through forgotten places that time itself seems to have abandoned, uncovering chilling true accounts that will make you question what really hides in America's loneliest places. Every story you'll hear tonight has been carefully checked and verified, taken from the real experiences of those who survived encounters that can't be explained by logic or reason. These aren't myths or ghost tales. These are real, documented events told by real people whose lives were changed forever by what they saw in the desert shadows and empty mining towns of Arizona. For privacy, some names and details have been changed, but every story's truth remains untouched. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Eerie Hour for daily true horror stories that will keep you awake long after the lights go out. Turn on that notification bell because darkness doesn't knock, it arrives quietly. Now let's begin with our first story from the ghost town of Bisbee, where a simple knock at the door turned into a fight for survival. My name is Emma, and what I'm about to tell you happened during my junior year of college, over winter break. I grew up in Bisbee, Arizona, a small mining town hidden deep in the Mule Mountains, about 90 miles southeast of Tucson. Most people haven't heard of it, and those who have think of it as an artsy little town or an old copper mining spot. What they don't know is how eerie it becomes when the sun goes down, when the air freezes and the wind moves through those old wooden houses like something alive. My parents decided to go on a cruise that December, their first real vacation in years. They asked me to join, but after a long, exhausting semester, all I wanted was to stay home, rest, and have the house to myself. Our home sat high on a hillside, far from the nearest neighbor, and I'd always felt completely safe there. Looking back, that false sense of safety almost got me killed. The first few days alone were peaceful. I read books, caught up on shows, and took long walks through the quiet old mining trails behind our property. The solitude felt like medicine after months of noise and stress. But on the fourth night, that peace shattered. It was around 2 a.m. I was half asleep, reading in bed, when I heard it. 3 slow, heavy knocks echoing through the house. The sound was so distinct, it made my heart jump. I froze, listening. Maybe I imagined it, I thought. Old houses make noise. But then, 3 more knocks. Slow, steady, deliberate. I slipped on my robe and went downstairs, trying to convince myself it could be a neighbor, maybe someone stranded on the road. I called through the door, asking who it was. A man's voice answered, calm, almost friendly. He said his car had broken down a mile away and his phone was dead. He asked if he could come in to use mine. His request sounded harmless, but something about his voice felt wrong, too casual, too rehearsed. My instincts screamed no. I told him I'd call for him, that he could wait outside until help arrived. There was a long pause. Then he asked again, his tone sharper this time, asking if he could come in to warm up. My stomach turned. I told him firmly I'd make the call, but I wasn't opening the door. Then I told him there was a gas station 2 miles down the road if he needed warmth. Silence followed. For a moment I thought he'd left, but then I heard soft footsteps along the side of the house. My breath caught. I rushed to the window and peeked through the curtain. In the dim porch light, I saw him, moving slowly along the walls, stopping at each window, peering in. He wasn't looking for help. He was looking for a way inside. I ran upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and grabbed my phone with trembling hands. I called 911, whispering that someone was trying to break in. The dispatcher stayed on the line, telling me officers were on their way, but the closest unit was 20 minutes out. Then came another sound, knocking again, but this time on my bedroom window. My room was on the second floor. He was on the roof. The knocking turned into scraping, the sharp edge of metal dragging against glass. I could barely breathe. The dispatcher's calm voice was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Then suddenly, it stopped. Silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Minutes passed like hours. I stared at the window, waiting for the glass to explode inward. Then faintly I heard sirens. Red and blue lights flashed against my walls, and I knew help had arrived. I ran downstairs as two sheriff's deputies burst onto the porch. They searched the property while a female officer stayed with me inside, making tea as I tried to explain what happened. When the others returned, their faces were grim. They hadn't found him, but they found proof. Muddy footprints circling the entire house, every window, every door, and near the basement, a crowbar dropped in the dirt. The officer told me there had been similar incidents nearby. A man pretending to need help, targeting homes where women were alone. In two of those cases, he got inside. One woman escaped, one didn't. She didn't need to say more. They took photos, gathered evidence, and told me to stay somewhere else until my parents came home. I called my aunt in Sierra Vista, and she came to get me right away. As we drove off, I couldn't stop glancing back, half expecting to see him standing in the shadows. The police increased patrols, and eventually the break-in stopped. They thought he'd moved on, but I wasn't so sure. I never went back to that house alone again. When my parents returned, I pretended everything was fine, but the truth is, I never felt safe there again. Years later, during Thanksgiving, I ran into an old friend from high school. Over coffee, she mentioned another attack that happened near Bisbee months after mine. A woman who survived and helped police catch her attacker. I looked him up later. The photo in the news made my blood run cold. I couldn't prove it was him, but the description, the behavior, it all matched. He was sentenced to 25 years for assault and attempted murder. I still think about that night, the sound of those knocks, the patience in them. I think about that crowbar, the boot prints, and how close I came to unlocking that door. I live in California now. My parents eventually sold that house and moved to Tucson. They never asked why I wanted them to sell it, and I never told them. Some things are better left unspoken, but every time I hear a knock after dark, I freeze. Just like that night, standing at the top of the stairs, listening to a stranger's voice asking to come inside. My name is Anderson, and before I begin, you need to know one thing. I've never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural. I have a degree in geology. I study rocks and earth science. My life is about facts and logic. But what happened in that mine outside Jerome, Arizona, changed everything I believed about the world. Jerome is a strange place, an old copper mining town built into the side of Cleopatra Hill, surrounded by the Black Hills of Yavapai County. Back in the 1920s, it was a booming city with nearly 15,000 people. Now barely 500 live there. The rest is a skeleton of what used to be. Crumbling buildings, empty mine shafts, and twisted tunnels that go deep into the mountain. It's become a tourist spot now, advertised as a haunted ghost town. I used to laugh at that. I thought it was just marketing, until the night I stepped into one of those abandoned mines. I've been exploring mines for about 5 years. It was a dangerous hobby, but I was always careful. I was part of a small group of 6 explorers who went into these places together, always prepared, always telling someone where we'd be. That night, only 4 of us could make it. Me, my best friend Michael, an EMT named William, and a high school chemistry teacher named Sophia. We had permission from the landowner to explore a section of the old United Verde mine that had been sealed since the 1950s. The official reason for its closure was structural danger, but after months of research, we believed the main tunnels were safe enough. Just after sunset, we entered through an old side tunnel. The outside air was warm, but the moment we stepped inside, the temperature dropped like we'd opened a door to a freezer. The air smelled of rust and decay. For the first hour, everything went as planned. We marked our path with reflective tape, took photos, and documented the layout. The tunnels were exactly what you'd expect. Tight spaces, cut through rock, broken wooden beams, rusted tools left behind decades ago. Our flashlights lit up walls that shimmered faintly with minerals. We had gone about half a mile into the mountain when we reached a fork, 3 tunnels ahead. 2 were caved in, filled with rubble. The third was wide open, sloping sharply downward into a pit of total darkness that seemed to swallow our lights whole. According to our map, this tunnel wasn't supposed to exist. It wasn't listed in any of the mining records we had gone through. Michael immediately wanted to turn back, but the rest of us were too curious. Undocumented tunnels sometimes led to untouched parts of old mines, where original equipment or forgotten artifacts could still be found. We took a quick vote, and the decision was 3-1 in favor of exploring it. Michael gave in, but I could tell from his expression that he hated the idea. Looking back, I wish I had listened to him. We started walking down the new tunnel, our footsteps echoing off the stone in a strange, uneven way. Something about the acoustics felt wrong, like the tunnel wasn't shaped naturally. The walls looked uneven and crooked, carved at odd angles that didn't match the precision of the other shafts. The deeper we went, the colder it got, and the smell began to change too. The sharp scent of metal and dust faded, replaced by something foul and organic, the kind of rotten, heavy odor that makes your stomach twist. We had been walking for about 10 minutes when Sophia suddenly froze and lifted her hand to signal silence. We all stopped, our lights overlapping on the tunnel walls ahead. That was when we heard it for the first time. A slow, rhythmic scraping sound, metal dragging against stone, echoing from somewhere deeper in the darkness. It wasn't random. It sounded deliberate, like something was moving closer. William tried to calm us down, saying it was probably just falling debris or shifting supports. Old mines always made strange noises, but this wasn't that. There was intention behind it. It was steady and controlled, like something alive was causing it. We stood there listening, trying to figure out how far away it was. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. The kind of silence that only exists deep underground, where no air moves and the world above feels miles away. That's when Michael's flashlight caught something on the tunnel wall. Long, deep scratches, 4 parallel lines carved straight into the rock, clean and sharp like claw marks. They were fresh. I could tell because there was no dust in them, no rust or discoloration. These marks had been made recently, but that was impossible. We'd verified that no one had been allowed in this section of the mine for decades. We should have turned around right then, but curiosity overruled fear. I told myself there had to be a normal reason. Maybe a trespasser had snuck in. Maybe the scratches looked new because of how our lights hit them. Maybe my brain was exaggerating everything because of the atmosphere. So we kept going, though slower this time, huddled close together. The tunnel widened into a large circular chamber, about 30 feet across. Our lights swept around the space, and what we saw made no sense. Every wall was covered with those same claw marks, hundreds of them, overlapping like tangled webs. The rock shredded into rough, jagged lines. The ground was scattered with what looked like bones, small and broken, impossible to identify. In the middle of the chamber sat a pile of debris, scraps of fabric, twisted bits of metal, shattered glass, and other things I didn't want to recognize. It looked like a nest. Before we could process what we were seeing, the scraping sound came again, louder now, closer. It was coming from one of the 3 smaller tunnels branching off the chamber. We all turned toward the sound, our beams of light trembling on the rough stone. For a moment I saw movement, something pale, bone-white skin, almost glowing against the dark. It looked human at first, but not quite. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent wrong, and its body moved in an unnatural, jerking crawl. Then it started coming toward us, fast. The scraping sound grew louder, not from claws, but from its limbs dragging over the rock as it scuttled forward. I caught a glimpse of its face, and the image will haunt me forever. It was sunken, hollow, eyeless. Its mouth hung open too wide, filled with teeth that shimmered like broken glass. I don't remember who screamed first, but all of us ran. We didn't think, didn't plan, we just ran. The tunnel echoed with our footsteps and ragged breathing, and behind us came the scraping sound, sometimes near, sometimes far, like it was toying with us. It was playing a cruel game, letting us believe we might escape before closing in again. Somewhere in that chaos, we lost Michael. One moment he was right behind me, the next he was gone. When we reached the main junction, we stopped, gasping for air, lights shaking as we looked back into the dark. William wanted to go after him, but Sophia grabbed him and screamed that if we went back, we'd die too. Her voice left no room for doubt. We ran again, following our reflective markers through the twisting tunnels, until we finally stumbled out into the night air. The warmth hit us like a wave, but we were sobbing, shaking, staring at the mine entrance, realizing we'd left someone behind. We called the police from William's truck. Barely able to speak, we told them everything, or tried to. It all came out broken and wild. They didn't believe us. Still, they sent a search team. For 3 days, they combed every tunnel with lights, radios, dogs, and ground radar. They found no trace of Michael, no chamber, no hidden passage. According to them, the tunnel we claimed to explore didn't even exist. It ended in a solid rock collapse decades old. They thought we were lying, or that something had gone wrong between us, or maybe we'd all hallucinated the same nightmare. But 6 weeks later, they found Michael's body. It was in another section of the mine, nearly a mile away, in a collapsed shaft that should have been completely unreachable from where we were. The condition of his body didn't make sense. The medical examiner said decomposition suggested he'd been dead for months, not weeks. His bones were crushed and torn apart in ways that didn't match a fall. The report called it an accidental trauma, blaming disorientation and unstable tunnels. They closed the case, but I know what we saw. William and Sophia know it too. We never went into another mine again. We don't even talk about that night anymore. Jerome still stands on its mountainside, filled with tourists chasing ghost stories, buying trinkets, taking pictures of haunted hotels. They have no idea what's really beneath them. No idea that something alive is still crawling through those abandoned tunnels. Something ancient. Something that was there long before the miners came and will stay long after the town is gone. I moved to Phoenix after Michael's funeral and left geology behind forever. But at night, when everything is still, I sometimes hear that scraping sound again in my dreams. The sound of claws on stone, and see that pale shape crawling toward me from the dark. And I remember that we left Michael down there with it. We left him to whatever horror waits in those mines. Jerome still calls itself haunted, but the truth is far worse. Something real lives down there. And Michael found it the hard way. The inside of my patrol car was suddenly filled with that same orange-white glow, so bright I had to cover my eyes. My radio exploded with static, loud and sharp, making it impossible to hear dispatch. I pushed open my door and stepped out onto the empty highway, one hand resting on my weapon, even though I had no idea what I was facing. The lights hovered right above me, maybe 100 feet up, still in that perfect triangle. As I stared at them, I felt a strange pressure pushing against my chest, a low vibration that seemed to crawl through my bones, making my teeth ache and my vision shake. I tried to yell, to demand some kind of identification, but my voice vanished into that heavy hum as if it had been swallowed by the air itself. I reached into my car for the radio, but it was dead. Not even static, just silence. I grabbed my phone, but the screen stayed black no matter how many times I pressed it. Time became strange after that. I remember staring up at those lights, frozen, my body heavy with that vibration. And then suddenly I was sitting inside my patrol car again. I didn't remember getting in. The lights were gone. The desert was dark again, my headlights cutting across the empty road like nothing had happened. My radio came back to life, the dispatcher calling my unit number with panic in her voice. I grabbed it and answered, but my hands were trembling so hard I could barely hold it. She asked if I was okay, saying I'd been silent for 3 hours. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 5:17 a.m. The last time I had checked, it was 2:15. Somehow, 3 hours of my life had just disappeared. I told dispatch I was fine, that my radio had malfunctioned. I didn't know what else to say. I wasn't about to tell her I'd lost hours of my life while staring at something that shouldn't exist. I started the car again and tried to keep patrolling, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept glancing in the mirrors, expecting those lights to appear again. When my shift ended at 6, I drove straight back to the station. Before going inside, I walked around my patrol car, my heart still racing. That's when I saw them. 3 burn marks on the hood of the car, arranged in a perfect triangle. Each was about the size of my palm, the metal beneath warped and darkened as if it had been exposed to extreme heat. The pattern was too exact, too clean. I stared at them, unable to breathe. Something inside me cracked. I went inside and wrote my report, leaving out the missing time and the marks. I said I'd seen strange lights, maybe flares or aircraft, and that my radio had cut out. I made it sound boring, routine, normal. The car was inspected later that day. The mechanic said the burns looked like heat damage, but nothing in the engine explained it. The electronics worked perfectly. He wrote it up as vandalism of unknown origin. The car was repainted, and I was assigned another vehicle. I told myself it was over, but it wasn't. 2 weeks later, I was driving the same route, Route 60, the long empty stretch between Wickenburg and nothing, when I saw them again. The same lights, the same triangle glowing on the horizon. This time I didn't stop. I pressed harder on the gas, keeping my eyes locked on the road. The lights followed me for 5 miles, staying perfectly parallel, then vanished without warning. Over the next 6 months, I saw them 4 more times. Always the same. Always between 2 and 3 in the morning. Always when I was alone. I stopped reporting them. What was the point? No one would believe me. And honestly, I was starting to doubt myself too. Maybe it was stress. Maybe I was losing my mind. But then I found out I wasn't the only one. One night I was having coffee with another officer named Garcia, a veteran, 20 years on the job. We were trading weird stories from patrol, and I casually mentioned seeing strange lights in the desert. The moment I said it, his face changed. He leaned forward and asked if I meant Route 60, between Wickenburg and nothing. I nodded, and he went quiet before telling me his own story. He'd seen them too, more than once. He had also lost time, his radio had died, and he had felt that same awful vibration. He said at least 3 other officers had seen them too, but most never talked about it. He told me the department knew. They had known for years. There were old reports, dating back decades, from both officers and civilians describing the exact same thing. But the higher-ups dismissed them, calling them flares, experimental aircraft, or tricks of the atmosphere. Garcia said the official story was always military exercises from Luke Air Force Base or Davis-Monthan. But he checked. No such flights were ever scheduled during those sightings. When he pushed for answers, the military stopped responding completely. Then he told me something that stayed with me ever since. 2 officers he knew had quit the force after their encounters. One developed crippling anxiety. He couldn't even drive at night anymore. The other became obsessed, spending all her time researching UFOs and government files until she was forced into early retirement. That night, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could keep doing the job and pretend nothing was happening, or I could let it consume me like it did them. I chose a third way. I asked for a transfer, far from Route 60, far from those lights. My request was approved within a week, faster than I expected. It almost felt like the department was relieved to move me. I spent 2 more years in a different district before leaving law enforcement altogether. Every time I put on that uniform, every time I got behind the wheel, I thought about those lights, about the 3 missing hours of my life, about what might have happened during that time. I started working private security after that. daytime shifts only. I live in Phoenix now, where the city lights drown out the stars. I tell myself that's a good thing, that it's safer not to see what's out there, not to look too closely at the dark sky. But sometimes when I'm driving at night and I catch lights in my rearview mirror, I feel that same pressure in my chest, that same hum in my bones. And for just a moment, I'm back on that lonely stretch of Route 60, staring at an empty sky, knowing something is watching me, something that doesn't want to be understood. My name is Benjamin, and I used to work in real estate, or at least I thought I did until everything changed. What happened to me in a quiet town called Snowflake, Arizona, didn't just end my career. It completely changed how I saw people, evil, and the kinds of darkness that can exist in places where everyone swears they know their neighbors. This story isn't about ghosts or monsters. It's about something much worse, what humans are capable of when they think no one will ever find out. Snowflake is a small town of about 6,000 people in Navajo County. It was founded in the 1870s by Mormon settlers, and it looks exactly how you'd imagine a peaceful desert town to look: quiet, religious, safe. People leave their doors unlocked, kids ride their bikes at dusk, and everyone waves at each other. But that's also the kind of place where secrets can stay buried for a very long time, especially when the right people decide it's better not to talk. I was 23 years old, still new to the real estate world, full of energy and dreams of success. Most of my work was in the Phoenix area, but sometimes I got sent to smaller towns for property inspections or appraisals. When my boss asked if I could check out a foreclosed house in Snowflake, I said yes right away. It was a solo job, which meant I'd earn the full commission if it sold. The listing said it was a 4-bedroom house sitting on 2 acres. Sounded simple enough. I drove out early one Thursday morning in June, heading north until the desert started changing color. The property sat on the edge of town, down a lonely dirt road surrounded by juniper trees and red rock hills. The house was an old single-story ranch built sometime in the 1960s. Its white paint was cracked and peeling, the porch sagged, and the windows looked empty, like eyes that had forgotten how to blink. According to the papers, the previous owner had just stopped paying and disappeared. The bank took it back, and now it was my job to inspect it. I unlocked the door with the key I'd been given and stepped inside. The air was thick and stale, the kind that clings to your throat. Dust coated everything. Furniture sat under white sheets, and there were personal belongings scattered around, like someone had left in a hurry and never planned to come back. I moved through each room, snapping photos, writing notes about the condition of the place. Everything looked normal enough, until I found the basement. The door was hidden behind a freestanding pantry, as if someone didn't want it to be seen. That should have been my first warning, but I was focused on work, not danger. I pulled the pantry aside, opened the door, and started down the creaking wooden steps. My flashlight cut through the pitch-black air, and that's when I saw it. The basement stretched farther than I expected. Rough concrete walls, dirt floor, and at the far end, something that froze me in place. It looked like an altar, a table made of rough wood, stained dark with something that looked too much like blood. Melted candles were stuck to the surface, their wax twisted into strange, lumpy shapes. And the walls. God, the walls were covered in symbols painted in a dark red-brown color. They weren't crosses or pentagrams, nothing I recognized. They looked older, foreign, wrong. The kind of wrong that makes your whole body scream to get out. I felt a chill crawl through me, but instead of running, I took out my phone. My training told me to document everything, so I did. I took photos of the altar, the symbols, the stains on the floor. I wrote down every detail my shaking hands could manage. Then I left that house, walked outside into the sunlight, and called my broker. He told me to hang up and call the police immediately, so I did. Within half an hour, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived. I showed them what I'd found, and when they went down those stairs, I'll never forget their faces. One of them had to go back up and vomit. The other called for backup, and soon, more law enforcement poured in. County, state, and then FBI agents. They told me I could leave after giving a statement, so I described everything I saw while they recorded it word for word. Then they told me not to talk to anyone about what I'd found. It was now part of an active investigation. I drove back to Phoenix in a daze. My hands wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel. I couldn't stop seeing those symbols, that altar, that table stained with something human. Over the next few weeks, news reports started trickling out. The house had belonged to a man named Robert Crane, a local religious figure who claimed to lead a private prayer group. People thought it was harmless, just another small-town worship circle separate from the main Mormon church. But it wasn't prayer that happened in that basement. Forensics confirmed it. The stains were human blood. And those strange markings? Experts said they were occult symbols used in rituals. When investigators dug deeper, they found Robert Crane was connected to at least 3 missing persons cases from nearby towns. The first real break came when police found a hidden crawl space above the basement. Inside, they discovered dozens of Polaroid photos. The pictures showed strange ceremonies, people in dark robes, candles burning, and others lying still on that same altar. Some faces were blurred, but forensic experts managed to identify a few. 2 of them were known missing persons. One was a 17-year-old girl who vanished after attending what her family thought was a church event. The other was a man in his 30s, last seen being helped by a religious outreach group. Those cases had gone cold years ago. Everyone thought the victims had just disappeared, but they hadn't. 3 weeks after I found the basement, Robert Crane was arrested in Nevada, living under a fake name in a rundown motel. At first, he refused to speak, but once he saw the evidence, he broke. What he said still makes me sick. He claimed he was leading a spiritual movement, performing what he called purification rituals that required blood sacrifice. He wasn't alone. 11 more people were arrested. Among them were 2 families from Snowflake, a teacher, and even a firefighter everyone in town respected. Some of them claimed they truly believed in Crane's teachings. Others said they'd been forced or threatened into silence. The trial lasted 4 months. I had to testify, describing what I saw that day. They showed my photographs on big screens in front of the jury. The altar, the blood, the symbols. Survivors came forward and told their stories. What they described was horrifying. Mental and physical torture, people disappearing, no one daring to speak. The details were beyond anything I'd ever imagined when I first stepped into that house. Robert Crane was found guilty of kidnapping, assault, and 2 counts of second-degree murder. The bodies of those victims were never found, but the evidence was enough. He got life in prison with no chance of parole. His followers got sentences from 10 to 30 years. The whole town of Snowflake fell apart. This was a place built on trust, families who had known each other for generations. Now neighbors looked at each other with fear and suspicion. The house was eventually torn down, but the damage stayed. I quit real estate after that. I couldn't step into an empty house again without thinking of that basement. I couldn't meet new clients without wondering what secrets they were hiding. The innocence I had when I was 23 was gone, replaced by a heavy distrust I couldn't shake. Now I work in commercial real estate, offices, retail spaces, places filled with people and light, where nothing stays hidden for long. I live in Tempe now, far from quiet small towns, far from anything like Snowflake. I've never gone back, though sometimes I read about it and how they've tried to move on. But I still think about that basement, about what was done there, about the victims whose bodies were never found. Because what happened wasn't supernatural, it was purely human. Humans turning evil and hiding behind faith, using trust as a shield for horror. And that, to me, is far more terrifying than any ghost story. Because the worst monsters aren't hiding in the dark. They live next door, smiling at you, waving good morning, hiding their cruelty in plain sight. It's been 5 years since I found that basement, but I still dream about it. I still see those symbols glowing red against the walls, still smell the rot in the air. And I still wonder how many other towns like Snowflake are keeping their secrets buried, waiting for someone like me to open the wrong door and uncover what was never meant to be found. My name is Olivia, and I work as a traveling nurse across Arizona. My job takes me from hospital to hospital, sometimes driving for hours through long, empty highways. I usually drive at night when the roads are quiet and I can make better time. Over the years, I've seen just about everything the desert roads can offer: dust storms, ghost towns, even stranded travelers. But nothing could have prepared me for what I'm about to tell you. It happened about 3 years ago on a lonely stretch of Highway 93 near Kingman, Arizona. That highway runs north toward Nevada, cutting through miles of dry, empty land where there's nothing but cactus, mountains, and silence. At night, it feels like another world, a place where sound disappears and the stars hang too close. Most drivers avoid it after dark, except for truckers and a few locals heading home from Las Vegas. The first time I saw the child, I almost crashed. It was around 11:30 at night, late October. I was driving home after 3 exhausting days at a hospital in Bullhead City. The road was empty, straight as a ruler, and quiet except for the hum of my tires. Then out of nowhere, my headlights lit up a small figure standing in the middle of my lane. A child, motionless, staring straight at me. My foot slammed the brakes so hard my car screeched and fishtailed before stopping just a few yards away. My heart was pounding, my breath caught in my throat. The child didn't move. He just stood there, small and still, his bare feet planted on the asphalt. He looked about 6 or 7 years old, wearing light blue pajamas patterned with something faint I couldn't make out. His dark hair hung over his face, and he didn't call out or flinch from my headlights. He just stared. I got out of the car, calling to him, my voice echoing strangely in the quiet desert. "Are you okay?" I asked, stepping closer. He didn't answer. I took another step, and in the blink of an eye, he was gone. Not running, not fading, just gone. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. The road in front of me was empty. My flashlight found nothing. No footprints, no scuff marks, not even the faintest sign anyone had been standing there. I must have stood frozen for a full minute before I finally got back into my car, locking the doors. I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination from too many sleepless nights. I told myself there had been no child at all, just a tired brain playing tricks in the desert darkness. But 4 nights later, I learned I was wrong. It was almost the same exact time, the same road, and there he was again. The little boy in light blue pajamas, standing in the same spot, facing my headlights. This time, I slowed down far in advance, pulling to a stop about 20 feet away. I grabbed my phone to take a picture, but before I could even lift it, he vanished again. Just gone, like he'd never been there. Over the next 3 weeks, I saw that boy 7 more times. Always in the same place, always around midnight, always disappearing when I tried to get closer. Each time, my heart would pound harder, my hands tightening on the wheel. I started to dread that part of Highway 93. I'd count the miles until I reached it, praying I wouldn't see him, though I always did. A small, silent figure in pajamas, standing in the dark, waiting. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I stopped at a gas station in Kingman one night and asked the clerk if she'd ever heard of anyone seeing strange things on Highway 93. Her face went pale. Without saying much, she picked up the phone and made a quick call. 15 minutes later, an older man walked in. He introduced himself as Martin, a retired highway patrol officer who'd worked that same route for nearly 30 years. We sat in a small diner booth next to the station, and I told him everything. He listened quietly, not interrupting once, just nodding now and then, like none of it surprised him. When I finished, he reached into his jacket and slid a worn photograph across the table. It was a picture of a little boy. Light blue pajamas, dark hair, same face. His name was Daniel Reeves. On October 17th, 1998, Daniel and his parents were driving home to Phoenix after a weekend in Las Vegas. Somewhere near that stretch of Highway 93, a drunk driver crossed the median and hit them head on. Daniel was asleep in the back seat and died instantly. His parents survived, but barely. The crash happened around 11:45 at night, the exact same time I'd been seeing him. Martin said that for 25 years, dozens of drivers had reported seeing the same little boy in the same spot wearing the same clothes. Some saw him once, others many times, but none ever forgot. Martin himself had seen him 3 times while on patrol, and he said it was the most unsettling thing he'd ever experienced. What made it even stranger was what often happened afterward. Many drivers who saw Daniel avoided accidents soon after passing that stretch. About half a mile past where he appeared, the road curved sharply with a steep drop-off. Dozens of crashes had happened there over the years, many fatal. But the people who saw the boy tended to slow down, their attention sharpened by fear or confusion, and that often saved their lives. Martin told me about a truck driver who saw the boy, slowed down, and discovered his brakes were failing. If he hadn't slowed when he did, he would have gone over the edge. Another woman stopped after seeing Daniel, too shaken to drive. As she sat there, a car going the wrong way sped past, the driver half asleep. If she hadn't stopped, she would have died in that collision. Martin said he didn't believe Daniel was trying to scare people. He believed Daniel was warning them, protecting them from danger. He told me that the boy always appeared around the same time his life ended, always in the same place, like he was tied to that stretch of road. I asked if anyone had tried to investigate it properly, to record or prove it. Martin smiled faintly and said many had tried. Ghost hunters, paranormal experts, even TV crews. But Daniel never appeared for cameras or researchers. He only showed himself to drivers, alone at night, when no one else could interfere. It was as if he chose who to help, following a rule no living person could understand. There's a white memorial cross along the highway marking the crash site. Daniel's family placed it there years ago. Later, when people started reporting the sightings, they added something new, a small plaque that reads, Daniel Reeves, loved son and guardian angel of Highway 93. The Reeves family believed their son had stayed behind to protect others, and after hearing Martin's stories, I began to believe it too. The next day, I drove out there in daylight. The desert looked harmless under the sun, but when I found the memorial, white cross, faded flowers, the plaque gleaming faintly, it felt different. I stood beside it, imagining the accident, the parents' screams, the quiet after the crash, and the little boy who never made it home. I saw Daniel one last time not long after that. It was my final trip from Bullhead City before I requested a transfer closer to Phoenix. He appeared the same way as always, standing in the middle of the road in his blue pajamas. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt something else. Sadness, yes, but also gratitude. I slowed down, stopped, and said softly, "Thank you, Daniel. I'll be careful," and just before he faded, I swear I saw him nod. A small, quiet motion, as if he'd heard me. I drove past the curve with my hands steady on the wheel, thinking about a little boy who had found a way to keep saving lives even after losing his own. I don't drive that highway anymore. My work now keeps me in the southern part of the state, and I avoid long night drives when I can. But sometimes when the desert is quiet and the night feels heavy, I think of Daniel Reeves. I picture him stand,